I never thought I'd be writing about this. I suppose you could say that kicking you in the teeth when you least expect it is just part of life. My name's Max, I'm 28, and I recently discovered that my wife, Lily, has been having an affair for over a year. As it turns out, I've also started dating her ex. I'm the husband of the woman my wife has been having an affair with. I'm just as shocked as everyone else. If this sounds like some kind of twisted soap opera, I'll give you some background. Lily and I have been together since college. We met at a friend's party. She was studying marketing, and I was studying engineering. You know, she had this laugh that really got to you. After dating through school and finally moving in together, we clicked immediately. I proposed to her at the same beach where we had gone on our first trip together. A year after we graduated, it was flawless. At least that's how I now see it. I remember we only invited close friends and family to our wedding, and I felt like we had the world at our feet. Our first few years of marriage were solid, nothing exceptional. We both had respectable jobs, saved money, and discussed buying a home and even starting a family within the next year or two. We were both excited when she acquired a new marketing position because it would provide her with more prospects and greater income. However, that job also required longer hours and more stress. She appeared aloof and fatigued after returning home. I assumed it was work-related. I thought it might help if I did more around the house, to give her a hand. But something seemed strange. About 6 months ago, she started staying out late, even on our date nights. She was always on her phone, and she was evasive. I thought it was just work, but it seemed like there was more to it. I started to feel like I was almost invisible, but I tried not to worry about it. One night, everything came to a head. I used my wife's laptop to check my email because mine had been acting up. When I opened the browser, a chat box with a message from a man named Jake appeared. It wasn't just any message, it was personal. The laptop froze for a moment, and every sentence of the chat felt like a kick to the stomach as I read it. They had been dating for several months, if not longer. I sat there trying to comprehend that my wife had been deceiving me all along. I couldn't even look at her when she got home that evening. I felt a strange mixture of rage and utter emptiness. I simply held up her laptop and showed her the texts as soon as she entered the room. Her face turned pale. She initially attempted to deny it, but eventually broke down and came clean. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She said that Jake made her feel special and appreciated. She also said that she felt neglected and that I was constantly preoccupied with my business. I put in a lot of overtime for us in order to save money for the house and the future. We'd always talked about it. Lily asked me to forgive her and said she'd end her relationship with Jake. She even offered to quit her job. I was too angry to think about forgiving her, even though she was saying all the right things. She'd been lying to me and had thrown away everything we owned. I couldn't get past that. After telling her I needed some time, I packed my things and went to stay with my friend Alex. Alex and I have known each other a long time. We've been friends since high school. He was there from the start because Alex introduced me to Lily when I was in college. When I arrived at his house that evening, he didn't ask me anything. Instead, he put me on his couch, let me vent, and told me I was welcome to stay for however long I wanted. He thinks I should break up with her because she made a decision rather than merely making a mistake. Although it has been difficult to hear, he is most likely correct. My mom called to inquire as to why Lily and I hadn't joined her for dinner. My parents learned of the situation, and it was cruel to tell them. Lily was too young for marriage or a bit self. My mom has never been a big fan of Lily, and now thinks I'd be better off without her. She's normally laid back, but this has really got her wound up. My dad called to say he'd support me whatever I decided, but he thought Lily had ruined my trust. She's been calling and texting me nonstop, even showing up at Alex's house. She keeps apologizing and says she'll do anything to make things right, but I still feel sick every time I think about it. I used to think of her as my rock. I can't even look at her anymore. Emma, Lily's best friend, called me yesterday to try to support Lily. She said that Lily had made a mistake, was lonely and was going through a rough patch. It felt like a kick in the face. You don't just stumble into a relationship. I wanted to tell her to stop making excuses for Lily, but I just told her I couldn't discuss it right now. I'm currently living with Alex as I figure out what to do next. I'm not sure if I'm ready to let go of the life we had planned, but I can't go back to how things were. We had discussed I've been thinking about having a family, having children, and relocating to a larger area. All of that seems absurd now. I feel sad, furious, and, to be honest, a little bewildered. Lily has been expressing her desire to fix things by attending therapy. Maybe therapy could help me deal with all of this, if nothing else, to help me get through the agony. I'm not sure if I have the capacity to do that. My mind is racing with questions. I feel like I might have missed something. Alex said I should focus on myself for now, but I can't stop wondering if we'll ever get our old life back. She was unhappy all along. What could I have done as a husband? I keep thinking about events, looking for clues that I might have missed something. It wears you out. Usually I have trouble falling asleep. I just lie there and try to figure out what went wrong. Jake even had the nerve to leave a voicemail yesterday. I didn't even listen to him when he said he wanted to apologize. Guys, I keep coming back to this one question. How do you move on when the guy you thought you'd spend your life has a way of letting you down like this? I don't need to hear anything from him right now. Is this marriage already too damaged to be fixed, or should I even try to salvage it? I've thought about getting a divorce, but the idea of starting again scares me. I really need some help right now because I'm stuck between what we had and what's left after a few sleepless nights. I was filled with too many questions. I eventually decided to meet with Lily. I feel like I'm standing on the brink of something big, peering into the unknown. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do next, but I wanted to chat with her and get some answers. I wasn't sure I was prepared to listen to what she had to say, but we met anyway. We met at a park close to our former flat, a place we often went to during our dating years. It felt strange to be there now, trying to make sense of this chaos. Lily looked rough. Her eyes were puffy and red, and she seemed smaller, as if the weight of it all had made her shrink. She immediately began to apologize, explaining that it wasn't. I was confused. I had assumed it was one thing, but she said it was another. She said she never meant to hurt me. I felt numb. I wondered if anything she said would have any effect. She told me that Jake was there for her when she needed him. She said she had been feeling abandoned and alone. I wanted to tell her that she should have spoken to me instead. I was shocked when she said that she was quitting her job. She said she'd done it to show me she wanted to make things right. I was at a loss for words. I wanted to think she was being honest and that she truly felt bad about what she had done, but I couldn't trust that. It had been a long time ago. Lily recommended therapy again, saying it didn't have to end this way and that we could work on things and rebuild. I told her I still needed more time to understand things. I felt like I'd just left someone else's life when I left the next day. I got an email from someone I'd been blocked from contacting. I felt sick when I opened it. I found some screenshots of Lily and Jake's messages from way before she'd said they'd started. They went back nearly a year, including info on their plans, meetings, and even their feelings for one another. She was with him on all the nights she'd said she was meeting up with friends or working late. I confronted her about it that same evening, telling her that I knew she hadn't been honest about when the affair started. It felt like my whole marriage was a joke and I was the punchline. She just broke down and told me that she hadn't told me everything because she thought that if I found out the truth, I wouldn't be able to forgive her. I was really shocked and asked her to leave after she told me. I told her I was done. I'd had enough of her crying and pleading. There was nothing else to say. A few days later, a woman named Emily called me. She soon explained that she was Jake's wife. I didn't recognize the name at first, but it turned out she was the one who sent me those messages. She had been aware of the affair for some time, but she was unsure of how to handle it. We could either approach him or me about it. When we finally met for coffee, it felt like we were speaking to a mirror. She felt betrayed, bewildered, and hurt. It felt reassuring to see her experience the same suffering. She gave me additional evidence, including texts, hotel receipts, and pictures. Jake had saved them. Emily and I began meeting frequently. Initially, we just exchanged information and stayed informed. But every new piece of evidence felt like another nail in the coffin of my marriage. She was the only person who really knew how I was feeling, so it was simpler to communicate to her than to anybody else. We also talked about life in general, the divorce process, and how our ex-partners were handling it. She told me that she could never forgive Jake, and that she was also going to file for divorce. We talked about how we were both taken by surprise, how angry we were, and how strangely happy we were to finally know. The truth is, I asked Lily to stay with her parents for a while. I needed space, and I couldn't possibly continue living in the same apartment as her. It felt strange to be alone in that apartment. It was too quiet, but every item of furniture and picture served as a reminder of the life we had created together. I started to pack up her things and put away memories that now seemed empty. My family has been great throughout this. Despite trying to hide her, I told you so. My mother, who had been wary of Lily from the beginning, was still mostly supportive. She and my father have been there to check in and make sure I'm eating. They've even tried to make me laugh. I'm normally prone to strong emotions, but my sister was proud of me for managing things so well. She had no idea how much that meant. My best friend Alex has been a great support. To help me stay focused, we've been spending almost every day together. He even convinced me to start working out again, which I hadn't done in a while. It's been great for me to get out and about, and he's been a great support. When it comes to the practical stuff, like finding a lawyer and making sure the divorce process doesn't get lost, Lily is still trying to get in touch. She's sent emails, left voicemails, and even written messages by hand. I read them first to find out if there was anything I didn't get any explanations or hints as to why she did what she did. In the end, I just stopped reading them because they were a constant reminder of how badly our relationship had broken down. It felt like another kick in the gut. So, I told her to speak with our lawyers exclusively from now on. I needed a fresh start, surprisingly. It's been tough to interact with our shared friends. Some of them are still friends with Lily, and many of them are unaware of the full story. It's made social situations strange, but I don't blame them. We used to go on double dates together, and when I ran into them last week, they were at a loss. I excused myself and left early. My marriage and my entire existence seemed to have been turned upside down. Nothing seems easy anymore. I was texting Emily one evening following yet another demanding workday. We hadn't discussed our ex-partners this time. We discussed our jobs, our favorite movies, and our trip destinations. We'd been talking for hours before I realized it. For the first time in what seemed like an eternity, I felt fine. I came to the realization that night that what Lily did didn't have to define who I was. As time went on, Emily and I started to meet up more often, even if it was just for a quick coffee or a walk. I still had a future ahead of me, free from her deception. I started to look forward to our conversations because she made me laugh. After a while, we both realized that we liked each other. It was a bit chaotic and insane, but it felt perfect. We were both still recovering, so we decided to take it slow. Even a casual relationship with her felt like a first step towards something positive and fresh. My friends and family don't know about Emily yet, and I'm not sure how they'll react. I understand that. I know it might seem a bit sudden, but I'm not just jumping into something because I'm upset and sad. I haven't felt like that for a long time until I met Emily. I'm still working out my goals for the future, but for the first time, I feel like I can see the path ahead. Many of my trust issues have been resolved. I've been working through some issues with therapy, and I'm also improving my communication and boundary setting skills. I'm coming to realize that I don't have to know everything at this time. I just need to move forward step by step, focusing on my own reconstruction and monitoring Emily's progress as the week went on. Over the past month, I've been getting used to my new routine. I'm not rushing things, but I'm also not ruling out the possibility of new developments. I'm starting to feel more like myself again, and I'm beginning to realize that perhaps the life I thought I'd lost wasn't really meant for me after all. It was difficult to move forward, but I was determined to make it work. My therapy sessions were really helpful, and as the pressure eased off, I started to see more of myself returning. I could finally breathe without that nagging pain of betrayal in my chest, and my anger wasn't as overwhelming. Emily and I kept things low-key. We met when it felt right and chatted about our lives outside of the mess our marriages had left us in. We laughed a lot because we didn't want to rush into anything. We had an unwritten agreement that made being around her feel soothing, almost like a salve for old wounds, even if I was healing myself, and I'd forgotten how easy it was to spend time with someone in the midst of all this. My divorce from Lily was formally finalized, and it seemed both final and bizarre to see the signed documents. It was as if the last chapter of a book I'd been reading had finally ended. I was ready to move on, not depressed. I was ready to start rebuilding my life and live it on my own terms. Once we'd worked out the details and divided everything as equally as possible, we both signed without further conflict. I no longer had to look back, which brought me a strange sense of peace. I thought it was time to tell my family about Emily. They'd been my rock during this whole ordeal, but I knew it might be awkward, possibly even controversial. I had to be honest with them. My mother gave me a very serious look when we sat down, presumably sensing that I had something important to tell her. I told them everything, including how Emily had helped me through my darkest moments, and how we had a natural understanding of one another. My sister was a bit slower to come around, though. Her face softened, and she surprised me by simply saying, "If she makes you happy, that's all that matters." She asked me a lot of questions, worried that perhaps this was just a way of avoiding the pain I had experienced. But she changed her mind after meeting Emily and realizing how grounded and perceptive she was. It was obvious that we had no intention of erasing the past or replacing anyone. We were just two individuals who had experienced similar kinds of hurt, and we were finding something genuine together. It was harder to tell Alex than it was to tell anyone else. I'd always been able to talk to him about anything, but for some reason I was hesitant this time. I didn't want him to think I was making a mistake or putting myself in danger. After a long silence, I nodded and gave him a half-smile when I finally told him. He clapped me on the shoulder and said, "Man, all I need to know is that she's making you happy." I only needed to hear that it meant the world to me to know he had my back. Meanwhile, word of my relationship with Emily began to circulate among our mutual friends. Some people gave me odd looks, as if to say I'd gone completely insane. Most were encouraging, though. I wasn't as offended by their viewpoints as I'd thought I'd be. It felt liberating to live by my own rules, regardless of what other people thought. Emily and I grew closer. I'd spent enough time hearing other people's opinions about how I should live my life. We began hanging out on the weekends, sometimes just spending peaceful mornings over coffee and discussing topics unrelated to our previous relationships. It felt like a fresh start, a way to explore who we were outside of the heartbreak. One day, she invited me to volunteer with her at a local animal shelter. I hadn't thought much about volunteering before, but I went along and ended up really enjoying it. There was something grounding about helping out and caring for those animals, and it made me feel like I was part of something bigger. At the same time, I started seeing changes in my life outside of our relationship. Work had always been an escape for me, but I found myself more engaged than ever. I took on new projects, tackled bigger challenges, and finally felt like I was hitting my stride. My boss noticed and offered me a promotion. I was finally achieving things I'd only dreamed of. I was doing it for myself this time, not because I was trying to prove anything to anyone else. It felt incredible the more time I spent with Emily. We realized we had similar values. We both knew what it meant to rebuild and rediscover ourselves, and to live life with intention. Sometimes we'd chat for hours, about everything and nothing. It was in those moments that I realized just how important it was to have someone who genuinely wanted to know who I was, not just who I used to be. About 6 months in, Emily and I decided to take a weekend trip together. We both needed a break from the city, and it felt like a natural thing to do. Next, we drove out to a small cabin by a lake, tucked away from everything. It was our first time truly getting away as a couple, and it was perfect. There were no distractions or reminders of the past, We were just us, figuring out what we wanted for the future. We talked about everything from small dreams to big goals. By the end of that weekend, I knew we were on the same page and that we didn't need to rush anything, but we both wanted a future together. When I came back, I felt like I'd shed the last remnants of my old life. Seeing Emily and knowing what we'd both been through made me appreciate every moment that much more. I know it sounds cliché, but I'd learned more from this experience than anything. I also had to face another challenge. I realized I was stronger than I thought, and that I'd finally found someone who valued me for exactly who I was. Our friends eventually got used to the idea of us being together, and it wasn't long before Emily started blending into my circle. She was like an old friend. Alex and she hit it off, and we'd sometimes have low-level arguments, but we always resolved them. We had some great game nights where we just chilled and had a laugh without worrying about anything. It felt like I'd come full circle, finding a new sense of belonging and purpose. A few weeks after our weekend away, Emily and I talked about moving in together. We knew it was a big step, but we also knew we weren't the same people we'd been before. We'd both been through enough to understand the importance of communication and honesty, so we agreed to give it some time. Still, we'd started looking at apartments, which was exciting. The idea of building a life together on our own terms is really appealing. Looking back on everything, I realized that the past doesn't define me. It taught me to value what's real and to let go of anything that doesn't serve me. Emily and I have talked about the future, even the idea of a family one day, but we're in no rush. We're happy just building something meaningful and real for the first time in a long time. I feel like I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. I don't need validation or approval. I just need this life. This chance to move forward with someone who truly understands me. Emily and I have helped each other heal, but we've also given each other something to look forward to, a fresh start, a chance to create something new. As Emily and I continued moving forward, our lives began to intertwine in ways that felt both natural and comforting. We found a balance that worked, built on trust and the kind of honesty that's hard to come by. I felt like I'd shed my old skin, letting go of every bit of anger and hurt every day. I felt like I was taking a step closer to the life I'd always hoped for. It was the life I thought I'd lost, but it was there over the next few months. Emily and I started talking about moving in together. We'd each made our own space for healing, and it was time to see how we fit into something more permanent. After looking at a few places, we finally found an apartment that just felt right. It was a small but cozy space with plenty of natural light and enough room for the life we were starting to build. It was close to work for both of us. We had a little balcony where we could have our morning coffee, and it was quiet enough that it felt like we were worlds away from the chaos of our past. Moving day came fast, and we spent that first weekend unpacking and laughing as we tried to figure out which box held the coffee maker and which one had all the dish towels as we set up the new place together. I felt this overwhelming sense of peace. I realized I'd found a partner who wanted to build something solid with me from the ground up without the complications of secrecy or broken. It was just us, living in a way that honored where we'd come from and where we wanted to go. One evening, as we were arranging the last of the books on our shared shelf, I looked over at Emily. I saw her surrounded by this life we'd created together. She caught my eyes and smiled, reaching out to hold my hand. In that moment, I realized how far I'd come from a wounded heart to a place where I felt secure, understood, and valued. I didn't say anything then, but I felt deep down that she was it for me. We started to settle into a great routine. We made time for each other but also kept our own space, so either of us lost the person we'd worked so hard to regain. We still spent time helping at the animal shelter, and we even ended up adopting a small rescued dog named Scout, a scruffy little terrier mix that had more energy than the two of us combined. Scout quickly became part of our new family, and there was something about having that tiny dog running about that made our place feel even by this point. I was also reconnecting with friends I'd lost touch with over the years. I was rediscovering parts of myself I'd neglected. Alex, who'd been there for me through thick and thin, continued to be a rock in my life. He was there to see me prospering, sharing laughs over dinners and the occasional basketball game. He adored Emily too, which made things even simpler. Having him around felt like a continual reminder of where I came from and how much I'd grown, and work was going well too after my promotion. I took on more duties, and with my confidence building, I found myself thriving in areas I hadn't expected. Emily was my biggest supporter through it all, urging me to embrace new challenges. For the first time, I felt entirely in charge of my life, grounded, and ready to take on whatever came next. As the months went by, Emily and I had more chats about our future together. We didn't hurry into significant decisions. Instead, we merely let things unfold gradually. We'd chat about our goals, our plans, and even the idea of starting a family one day. We both agreed we weren't in a rush this time. There was no pressure or obligation, and our goals seemed genuine and shared. When we were having dinner on the balcony one evening, Emily asked me a question I hadn't anticipated. "Do you ever feel like everything that happened brought us exactly where we're meant to be?" We knew exactly what we wanted and trusted that we'd get there in our own time. Her eyes were gentle, and it was clear she felt the same way. It was clear that she felt the same way I did, that all the pain and betrayal had brought us to this point and to each other. My family finally met Emily, and it seemed real to see her with them. I nodded and gripped her hand, realizing that often the most difficult situations in life are simply detours towards something better. My mother, who had been cautious but supportive, took to her right away. They felt as though Emily had always been there, her warmth dispelling any misgivings they might have had. And her laughter filled the room. Before I knew it, months had become a year, and our lives were beginning to expand in a way that felt almost simple. By the end of the night, I could see how my family viewed her not just as someone in my life but also as someone they truly cared about. I no longer felt regret or haunted by my former recollection. They had become softer, naturally. I could still recall every detail, but it now seemed to be a story I had outgrown. It had influenced me, but it hadn't defined who I was. I had heard from Common I was aware that Lily and Jake were still involved in a difficult situation, but I had lost interest in learning the specifics. I was finally at peace with the fact that their lives were distinct from mine. Emily and I rented a cabin by a lake for our first anniversary getaway. It was a memorable weekend when we first understood how much we meant to one another, and it felt like we were coming full circle from where we had begun. As usual, we hiked, cooked, and discussed our future plans during the days. When I saw her, I realized that this was the life I wanted, a life based on respect, understanding, and unconditional love. Looking back, I feel so fortunate. After experiencing heartbreak, I found something I didn't even realize I was looking for. Emily had gone through her own suffering, but we managed to come together and start over, building a new life on the foundation we had established. I was aware that this was more than a simple comeback or response to the past. I had discovered a type of love with Emily that I had never experienced before. I never even realized it was possible, and I wanted to cherish and guard it for as long as I could. It lacked ostentation and a lot of dramatic movements. It was the kind of affection that made me feel like I had finally arrived home, quiet, steady, and unflinching. I came to see that sometimes the most difficult things in life aren't meant to break us. They're designed to get us to the precise place we're meant to be. As I look to the future, I'm full of hope and thankfulness for everything that has brought me here. Since my journey brought me to a life I can now truly call my own, I wouldn't change a thing. I know that I will face whatever the future brings with someone who genuinely gets me and who supports me, not out of obligation but out of choice. The hurt of betrayal and the hardships of the past did not destroy me. They guided me into a new phase of my life, one that was full of contentment, meaning, and the purest form of love. That's the life I'll continue to create, thankful for each day as I go.